So I get a lot of questions from teachers, and they ask questions like, I've got kids collaborating. How do I know that they're both contributing? I think I might have kids that are sharing documents and maybe copying each other's work. How can I tell? How do I want to see each person's contribution in more detail? How do I do that? Well, that's what I want to talk about today. And I'm going to talk about two very specific tools. One is built into the Google ecosystem. It is the revision history of a document. And the other is a really cool extension called DraftBack that I'll show you. First, I want to start with the revision history. So there's two easy ways to get to the revision history. I can go to File, and then make sure just look down on File, and you will see Revision History. It will also be Command Option Shift G in this case, but that's way too many keys for me to remember. So I can click Revision History there, and it's going to take me here. And you can see on the right-hand panel there, it pulls up the revision history of this document. There's another easy way to get to revision history. I'm going to go back. So remember, the first way was to go to File, see Revision History. The second is actually, if you remember it, quite easy, where you see here where it says that the thing was last edited on March 16th, because this was a class that Lee and I were collaborating on last year. I can click right there, and it takes me right into the revision history as well. And what this revision history does is it reveals the entire history of the revisions by the collaborators. So you can see we started this thing way back in January at the beginning of the semester. Lee started it, and then I started contributing in February, and then we just both started contributing the whole semester long. And so the analogy here to think about is, so you've assigned group work for kids. You want to make sure they're both contributing. So I can go to the revision history of the document, and I can see everybody's contribution. And so if I click on, let's say, March 9th here, and what you're going to see, it's going to pull up what it looked like on March 9th. So notice March 9th showed up right here. And it's got Lee's work in, if you can tell on the person, Lee's assigned sort of a teal color and I was assigned purple. So you can see this version on March 9th at 4:22, Lee added this photo walk hashtag EDSS530IG. If I was doing any revisions on this day, you would have seen the purple for me. If I scroll down, I don't really see anything right now, so maybe I didn't do much that day. Sorry, Lee. But what you need to understand is if kids are collaborating on this long document, I think of these revision history as layers of the document. And if you've ever worked with photo editing, Photoshop works in layers where one thing sort of lays on top of the other, and the totality is what you're actually seeing. And so imagine from January 26th through March 16th, there were 40 layers here. And then we go back to March 9th, which might have been layer 30, right? And I know when I've done this in the past using other tools, if I reverted back or I did something like that, I would lose all of the revisions from that point, forward in time. But it doesn't work that way in Google with the revision history. If you think about these in layers, and let's say that I have 40 layers and I'm looking at layer 30 and I'm like, oh, I want to go back to that version. Well, I can restore to that revision. And I'm going to do it right now. So I've restored to that revision, and notice now it's back on March 9th. And then I'm like, oh crap, I really didn't want to do that. Well, that's not a big deal, because instead of having 40 layers, technically I now have layer 41, which took that March 9th layer that I was calling layer 30, and all it did was brought a copy of it to the top. I can go right back into the revision history, and I can go back to March 16th, which was the actual last true revision, and I can click Restore to that. And so it's super easy if kids try to delete each other's work, or you're working on something over time and you're like, I want to go back, and then, oh, I'm not happy with that. You can really easily, using the revision history, get to the version you want. And the good news is you don't lose anything unless someone deletes the entire document. So the revision history is another good way to ensure that each kid is pulling his or her own weight. And it is also a good way to see if kids are sharing work and maybe getting the temptation to just copy the whole thing and call it their own. So imagine I'm going to do that with this. I'm going to create a new document, not a Google Sheet. I'm going to create a new document, and I'm going to go back to that class agenda, and I'm going to do a Control A or a Command A, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go back to this untitled document, and I'm going to paste everything in there. Okay, and so I'm going to then tell my teacher, guess what? I did all this work myself. So I'm going to take full credit for this. Well, guess what? You as the teacher could go, okay, I see what you're doing there. You've submitted, let's say this were an essay to me. Well, obviously, if this thing is pages long, I should see a pretty good revision history, right? So if I go to File, see Revision History, well, if I only see one revision history and I can tell by the color that I'm now assigned teal that it was all done on one shot, well, that's a pretty good sign to me that perhaps this kid didn't do his or her own work. So the revision history is a great way for you to check that. One of my other favorites, I'm going to go back to that same document Lee and I were collaborating on, is this new thing called DraftBack. It's new, fairly new to me, about 6 months. And DraftBack is an extension. So what you want to do is you want to go to the Chrome Web Store, and I want to just search DraftBack. And by doing that, you will see that DraftBack comes up. And what I do with this is I install it into my Chrome browser. And notice it says I already have it, so if you didn't have it, it would say add to Chrome. Well, I've added it to Chrome. And you won't see it in your extensions bar where you normally find your extensions. It installs and becomes operational right inside of your Google Documents. So here is that same document that Lee and I were collaborating on. And now what I want you to notice is DraftBack, because the extension is installed, now it works in all of my Google tools. So this thing has 1,700 revisions. If I go play back this document history, watch what happens. It's really cool. And I stored a revision to hopefully for time's sake. So I'm going to click play the stored revision. And then what you can do, now think about this. This is great for getting into the mind of the kid. Let's assume positive intentions, that we're using this tool to track students' thought process. And what we're doing here is DraftBack is playing back the entire recording of this document. So we can see what kids typed, we can see what they deleted, we can see what they were thinking. I love this idea for just really getting into the mind of the writer. And so this is a really great way to give feedback to them as a writer, perhaps saying it's just a really cool way to see what they were thinking, how they were doing it. But you can also, if you see here, document graphs and statistics. I can go into the graphs and statistics of this document. And this is another one where if I want to make sure that everybody's pulling his or her own weight, check this out. It gives me the timeline of activity on this document, what was going on here. It gives me where were the document changes. So I don't even know what this is, to tell you the truth, but writing sessions, this is what I'm interested in. Check this out. It tells me that on Monday the 26th, Lee spent 4 minutes and 41 seconds with 242 revisions. And then if you go down here on Monday, March 9th, I spent 9 minutes and 33 seconds with 134 revisions. So this is a really good way to get some detailed feedback as to what each person's contribution was to this document. And guess what? It's absolutely free. So the two things that we talked about today were the revision history, and we talked about using DraftBack. So the revision history is already part of your Google ecosystem. You just want to go to either File, see revision history, or remember, if it says there was a last edit here in the center, you can just click on that. And for DraftBack, you want to grab that from the Chrome Web Store, search DraftBack, look for an extension, and go ahead and add that to Chrome. And then it gives you the ability to watch the document played out, or you can get statistics on the document. So hopefully this will help you as you charge forward and do awesome things with your kids. Please, please, please email me if you have any questions. I would be happy to help you.